Hi, today we're going to talk about consumer research. This is an introductory lecture to talk about different ways that we might develop consumer research or how we might research our consumers. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is consumer research? Well, in short, it's the process of finding the needs, wants, desires, and anxieties. Now, those words are really important of a particular group of people in order to fulfill their requirements. What do they need? What do they want? Are they the same thing? What do they desire to have in their lives? And what are they anxious about? The process involves determining statistical data, or data if you're British, as well as delving deeply into reasoning and motivation. So motivation for purchasing, why do they want to buy things, what is their reason, as well as where they live and what they might earn. Why is consumer research important? Well, it's important because as a designer, we engage in what we call a triadic discourse, a three-way conversation, a visual conversation with our wearer, the person who wears the clothes, and the viewer, the person who looks at the person wearing the clothes. Now, we need to understand the viewer's identity and cultural and visual literacy. The wearer needs to understand our motivations and what we're providing for them. The viewer needs to understand the wearer's semiotics of their clothes, so where they sit within a culture based on the symbolism within their clothes. They also need to understand our authorship of that product, so our creation of that identity. And we as designers need to understand the motivations of the wearer, how they're going to feel when they wear our clothes. And the wearer needs to understand how the viewer is going to respond when they wear their clothes. So this is one of the reasons why this is really important, because we're engaging in this visual conversation all the time. Understanding these two is our target market. So our target consumer might be the person wearing the clothes, but it might be the person looking at the person wearing the clothes. So in the case of children, for example, mostly the person who purchases the garments are not the person who wears the garments. Consumer research will help us focus our design. It'll help us ensure sales, so to provide a foundation for us to make sales decisions. It'll help people come back and purchase again. It'll help us connect with the consumer on a more meaningful level. The stronger emotional connection we can have with our consumer, the more likelihood of them wanting to purchase our product. And it will keep them coming back more and more and more. It will keep them engaged. How do we do consumer research? Well, fundamentally, we do one thing. Bonk. We do research. Now, designers often freak out when they hear about research, but it is so fundamental to what we do. And researching consumers is no different. From our primary research, this is maybe the main thing we look at. We actually engage with our people that we think are our potential consumers. So we might speak to them. We might create some surveys. This is kind of quantitative research where we get statistical information. We might undertake things like focus groups. We get qualitative information, so lots of reasoning and lots of understanding. We might observe our potential consumers in the wild, let's say. So maybe in a retail situation, or maybe in other situations where they might occur. We look at secondary research. So that is where we might be looking for aspiration figures. So key people, not influencers necessarily, but key people that our consumers might want to emulate. But we see what other people are doing. So people are of a similar demographic perhaps, but also other designers. Where we consume their culture. So understanding what feeds their identity, what cultural triggers impact their identity. Where we use social media. So we might explore social media in a similar way that our consumers do. So what hashtags do they follow? Who are the people that they're looking up to? How do they interact with each other using social media platforms? Now, most social media platforms were designed for one purpose and then used in a different way. So this is a kind of key thing for us. And then last, we're looking at kind of our tertiary research. So how do our consumers access fashion? Maybe they do it through magazines, maybe they do it through social media. How do they... Oh, now this is a big one. It's important. Do they like pineapple on pizza? Now, this is a really crazy question, but it's a very divisive question. So people either love it or they hate it. Some crazy people sit in the middle. But what it does is it creates cultural tribes, a question like this. So when we're looking at our kind of tertiary research, we're looking at the things that our consumers might connect to on a really broad level. So something like, do they like pineapple on pizza? It's a dumb question, but it's a question that makes people really respond, and respond in a really strong way. What social pressures do they face? So if we're designing garments for people with young children, they might face different social pressures than someone who's a retiree. What broader issues face them? So these might be political issues, there might be cultural issues, there might be environmental issues, there might be financial issues, there might be familial issues, there might be all different areas that have an impact on their ability to purchase or ability to engage with our label. And firstly, when we've done our research, we might focus on something like demographics. And demographics ask very statistical based questions. How many kids do you have? 0, 10, 15, 12, 1? What is your income? What are your buying habits? Do you have pets? Do you own? Do you rent? What food do you eat? Where do you live? What age are you? What is your sexuality? Are you married? Do you exercise? Oh no. Do you have a car? Oh, I found that one. What media do you consume? Now, what this does is it gives us some numbers and it helps us target our advertising spend, for example, but maybe helps us target our retail outlet. So, for example, if the person is married and they have 2 children, they own a car, and they own a house, then we could probably, and they exercise by taking their children to the park on the weekends, then it would make sense for us to locate our shop near a park within driving distance of their house. And what we do then is we create this target, this kind of bullseye for our consumers. And right in the middle is our target customer, our aspirational figure, the person that fits all of our demographics exactly. And a little bit out from that might be our core consumer, the person who wants to be the aspirational person. Now, there are a lot more core consumers than there are aspirational customers. And then going on from that might be our occasional consumer, so the person who might sit kind of their demographic, or mostly maybe 50% with their demographic, but not 100% there. So if we are looking at percentages, our aspirational customers are 100%, our core might be 75%, and our occasional might be 50%. But obviously there's a lot more of those people than there are of our aspirational figure. And then we have our broader consumer, so someone who might be married but not have kids, for example. So maybe they're kind of 30% there. And then lastly is our casual consumer, so someone who's maybe 10% there. Yeah, they drive, they go to the park occasionally. Oh, their shop's right there, so maybe they'll wander in and maybe buy something. But you can see there's so many of them. And in this way, we can plan our product range, our product offering, to encompass the needs of all of these people. And we do this by developing ourselves a customer profile. Here's an example of one. Well, this is very pixelated. But you can see it includes things like age, location, income, and then shopping habits, looking at attitudes towards brands, these sources of influence, interests, psychological makeup, lifestyles. But this person doesn't really exist. This is a very high income for someone this old who lives in a really massive city. LA is an enormous city in the US. And the likelihood of that person having that amount of money and still being able to buy clothing whilst living in that city is pretty minimal. Let's take a look at that person. So this is a customer board. And we can see here, looking at these images, that this is the kind of ideal person. Very cool, very pared back, very sleek. Interesting enough, this person's supposed to live in LA, but all of this aesthetically points to somewhere like New York. So when we base all of our work on demographics, this is the kind of stuff we've come up with. Is a best guess. Here's another one, 20-year-old student. Okay, it's very British. Now this is what someone is suggesting is the All Saints customer profile. Now probably the actual consumer of All Saints is a lot older than 20, but maybe they want to feel like they're 20. Maybe they want to relive their days as a student. But can you go further? Yeah, we can go a lot further than just demographics. Demographics really just give us a kind of snapshot. They don't go into any real detail. And what we should be looking at then is looking at values-driven research when it comes to finding out who our consumer is. Now, if you think of demographics as being our quantitative data, values-driven research will be our qualitative data. So looking at the kind of the qualities that make up the person who is our consumer. In this way, we can probably avoid demographics. So when it comes to an issue like climate change, someone who's 20 and single might have very similar feelings on it than someone who's 60 and a grandparent. So demographics become meaningless. So we want to ask questions like, what makes you happy? What do you need from a brand? Who are you as a person? What do you want from a brand? So different to need from a brand. So what do you want from a brand is maybe different to what you need. What makes you mad? What do you stand for? How are you unique? What are your anxieties? What makes you sad? What can't you live without? What do you love? What gets you up in the morning? What are your desires? What drives you? And that gives us an understanding of the motivations. What motivates a person to do something? What do they want to communicate them about their identity? Whether that's real or imagined, what do they want to be, perhaps, as opposed to what they are? And from that, we can create a pen portrait. And a pen portrait is a lot more descriptive in nature and a lot more kind of narrative driven. Now, of course, we have another fantastical pen portrait here, a 21-year-old who has £750 a month to spend on disposable income, £500 from her parents and £280 from her job. Take a look and read this. It's not a real thing, but actually creates a kind of fantasy identity for someone to aspire to. So maybe I'm not 21 and live in London and have lots of cash, but I can definitely buy the jeans and the white t-shirt to make me feel like I'm a young, carefree person living in London. This is another one, and this is very kind of narrative driven, written, presented as prose as opposed to kind of stats. She's not very good at doing her own hair. That kind of indicates her kind of priorities when it comes to her appearance. She doesn't have time because she's very busy, so she relies on a good cut and colour, which she gets done every 6 weeks. Crikey, that's often. So we can see from something like that this says a lot about who this person is. Now again, this person probably won't shop with our brand, but maybe she will. But a person who wants that lifestyle, who dreams of one day having that lifestyle, probably will. And here's our image again. Some image-based research for this person. She wears j'adore. She does, yoga. Lives in a nice place in London. Has a jazzy phone. Drinks from jazzy cups. Eats sushi. Drives a large, tiny car. Honestly, that's a terrible handbag, but still. But that person probably wouldn't shop at Zara. That is out of context for the rest of these things. But a person who wants this one day as their lifestyle might be able to shop at Zara. Now, we can do these pen portraits about things, not just people. So this is maybe what we might see as a pen portrait of 2020. Looking at all the issues that we've all faced this year as communicated by fashion. I think my favorite one is this one. So when we do that, we kind of start to look at our bullseye a bit differently. So our center of our bullseye might be a muse, might be the kind of ideal person. Not real, maybe fantasy, but a person that kind of gives us inspiration as designers. Moving out from that, we might be looking at people actively trying to be the muse in different ways, but kind of trying to have that ideal lifestyle. And then we might look at someone who's aligned with the muse. So someone who maybe has a different lifestyle, but is kind of aligned with the things that drive that person, their political views and their social identity. And then we look at someone who has similar values, but maybe doesn't really communicate it so much, but does it or perhaps does it in a more subtle way. And then we'll have someone who connects the aesthetics of that person. So we can see a different way of viewing our bullseye. Thank you so much for watching. Diolch yn fawr, as I say here in Wales, and talk to you soon. Oh yeah, like and subscribe, like Jojo Siwa says.